Welcome everyone to this session of D2C Dialogues. In this session, we'll try to unpack how women leaders build brands and what are some ways of, building a diverse, inclusive, and actually a gender balanced workplace as well as a brand. Aditi, who's the co-founder of Nestasia, and me, Chief of Staff at Fireside, we'll be moderating this session. And we have two amazing women with us, Ayushi, who's the founder and CEO of FableStreet, and Priyanka, who's the co-founder of the sleep company. They will be answering all questions, helping us understand what they are doing within their brands and what is their take on, having a gender balanced workplace and a brand. Both of them are, really innovating using technology to drive products that are new to this Indian environment and obviously taking it to global levels at some point. So really excited that we can, hold this session and really learn from them more than anything. And of course, Aditi and I will moderate, ask questions. For those of you who've not attended this session before, how the format is that for the first 20-25 minutes, Aditi and I will ask them questions, try to get them to give us their insights, and then we'll open it up for Q&A in the last half an hour. You can use the Q&A section or section instead of the chat section for your questions, or at that point, raise your hands and we'll try to bring you in to ask the questions to either Priyanka or Ayushi. Yeah, so great. Let's get started with this round of D2C dialogues. So both to Priyanka and Ayushi, right? We are observing a trend in this current day and age that, a lot of D2C brands have women leaders or women co-founders, founders. What is your take on that? Is this happening because of something? Is this a good thing? What has been some positive or maybe even negative implications of this? But would love to get your thoughts on what is happening in this sector and how is this, driving you both as well?
Right. Thanks, Reemsha. Hi, everyone. Super happy to be here and, having this conversation. So I think, so first look at Reemsha, as you said, yes, I think it's a good thing that we're seeing, not just in D2C, but we're seeing more women come into a workplace, right? And absolutely, I think you do have a cause and effect there, right? So first, if you look at any D2C brand, right? Most of the D2C brands, let's look at the consumer, who the consumer is, right? If we look at categories like fashion, your lifestyle, your beauty, your home, right? I think the main reason is the woman in most of the cases is, I think, the decision maker or kind of buyer for these products. So I think intuitively what is happening, it becomes, I think, not easier, but it's important to understand the journey of these consumers and what are the gaps in the drivers that drive certain behaviors, right? Or the certain buying patterns. So I think that is one of the reasons that you see a kind of more women venturing into this space, because you end up understanding other women's journey and you end up relating to the gaps that they have. Right? I think that's one thing. I think second thing that we are seeing today, which is I think a good thing, right? You're seeing success stories. You hear Nika, you hear Mama Earth, you're seeing a lot of success stories, which is I think in turn motivates and inspires other women to venture into it, and really follow the suit or follow their passion or their dream, which I feel, is a very, very good thing, because to me, it's not about men or women, right? To me, it's about really the equality, or anybody who wants to do it and who has a certain passion should do it.
Ayushi, your take on this?
I actually, first of all, thank you for asking this question. It's a very interesting question. I keep asking myself, why is it the case? A couple of thoughts from my end, and also I quite resonate and echo what Priyanka said. Number one, I think to what Priyanka said, that, women are the consumers and the core TG that we're targeting. So the ability to reflect on that journey is better for women, right? So therefore it's a more natural fit. If you also step back and look at the history around it, most of the businesses, and it doesn't matter whether it is startup or a regular business, right, mostly run by men historically. And Whereas women are the decision maker, or women are the consumers in significant number of businesses, be it like we run fashion. Women decide what they want and how they want to wear it. Similarly, in multiple places, right? So sometimes the ability to connect and genuinely deeply understand what the consumers want is at times missing, which a woman can resonate a lot more with that need. So that by design, gets women to get translated into women-led businesses around it. I think that's one thing that I have seen. One of the reasons when I ventured into fashion or trying to start in workwear as a space was that most of the workwear brands were led by menswear brands who were translating and putting offshoot of menswear to women's wear. And that's not how it works. We just think differently. We want differently. Men shop on the basis of need. Women shop on the basis of want. Just the core fundamental principles on how women operate and women consumers operate is different. So you would and eventually see women founders coming in the system. Second, two more things I would just add over here is it's also a little bit of a cause and effect. Overall number of women in workforce is low. Overall number of women overall running businesses is low. So it's, I would say proportionately, you would end up seeing similar number of founders as you see in women in leadership positions around this. A little bit more on D2C is also a similar bit on where you come from. Women in tech is much lower, or women in 100% tech, women who do engineering. Priyanka and I come from same college. I still remember I was 1 in 6 women out of a class of 100, and same at IMCAL, I was 1 in 10. So, so end of the day, it is quite similar, right? The proportion is carried on. So similarly, women who have direct association with brand in the brand marketing spaces, etc., are relatively more. And that's how where you are closer to the D2C space. So I think that's also the reason I would say a little bit of cause and effect on why women founders are driving D2C businesses a lot more significantly as compared to men equally. Third, I think it's more nuanced about the behavioral tendencies of women. I would say, and I mean, here I don't want to categorize men or women. I would treat it as more feminine behavioral tendencies, where the passion and the decision making, I would say, is stronger in a feminine approach to leadership and business and risk-taking ability. So if you associate with the cause, you will at times go all out. And if you therefore also see historically the way D2C brands have been formed, be it like either a Mama or Yoga Bar, or even what I'm doing at FableStreet, and I'm sure at Sleep Company, etc. So many times it is a genuine problem that all of us have faced. And then we have all taken a plunge saying we believe that this is a great business to be. And we've taken that plunge. Having said that, I just want to add one more general thought and nuance to it, because when we say that women are driven with passion, does not mean that women don't think with their mind. And that doesn't mean that they're not here to build larger businesses, but both can exist. And, the second aspect or the former aspect of fashion ensures that you take it one notch further and take that risk.
No, great point. I think the follow on to this, I think, would be then, what do you think is that implication on the culture of a brand, whether it's the way the brand is built or how customers are generally understood, or what customer insights you try to get? Is there some sort of an implication there, or what practices do you adopt to do this?
Yeah, so, I'll go ahead, Reemsha. So I think as Ayushi said, right, that women are the feminine nature, right? I think, the first element that plays a role, which is the consumer understanding, and take any D2C brand, right? To build a D2C brand, an iconic or a sustainable brand, the most important thing is understanding your consumer, right? And really empathizing with the problem they have or the gap they have, right? So I think, the women resonate more, and hence I think the intent is to solve that problem, right? Second, I think which happens is, I think the more approachable element. So if you see today's ecosystem, right, consumer is really changing, and it's not just women or men out there, but the consumer is changing. Today's consumer is spoiled with choices, right? Today's consumer wants brands that are transparent, that are really approachable. I can talk to the brands, right? And I think women women, I mean, I think women really understand that, and they are. So I think what we do at the sleep company, for example, every month we have a session where it's talk to Priyanka, right? Which is, all our consumers come out there and they share their feedback, they share what is not working with us, right? So I think that is what I think, given the behavior, I think the traits, you end up doing more, right? And similar from an organization culture, right? I think the two things that differences I would say, or I see, one is I think a little bit on diversity, and I'll add a little bit there. For example, in the, not just in the startup ecosystem, but in the business, is one of the bias I think most people end up having. I think people think that startups, obviously agility and speed is very, very important, right? So I think one of the bias most of us end up having, that men are more equipped to bring that on the table, right? Because we think women have responsibilities beyond work, which could be an hindrance, right? But let's say when a woman or founder or a co-founder is there, you would not have that bias most of the time, right? And hence you would work on building a diversity in the organization. Obviously it has to be very meritocracy based, right? Who fits the role better, right? It cannot be just the fact of men versus women, right? I think that's one thing that you see a difference from an organization perspective. I think the second thing is, the behavior that goes with the consumer also goes with the employees, right? I see more empathetic organizations as well, right? Where you understand even the challenges or the gaps that your employees could have, or the motivations that your employees have, right? So I think that's what I would say really works in favors of what can really help build a brand, as well as a long-term organization, right? Because people is the most important asset to have if you want to build anything, right? So I think that's how I see a little difference in what women could bring on the table, in building brands and organizations.
That's a really good point, Priyanka. I think, and even to hear, I mean, Ayushi's thoughts, please, what do you think about how we can foster a culture which is relatively, more conducive as such?
So, yeah, I was also about to say that I think the culture and the customer need identification actually in my head are two different parts. So I'll pick up the element on culture first. And before we deep dive into it, I think women bring in an aspect of feminine leadership more naturally. And I therefore always try to distinguish the meaning of feminine leadership than women leadership, because a lot of men can display the the characteristics of feminine leadership, but if you see, women naturally bring that. And then the couple of aspects to that is one that Priyanka mentioned: empathy, care, leading from a space of passion, in addition to problem solving, etc. around it, thinking more sustainable and long term, and not just short term in the near term. And that's more natural to women as they start building the leadership. Now that aspect of feminine leadership, coupled with an aspect of strong drive, aspiration, and aggression, which a lot of startups by design have to have and bring in, right? It's jointly a very strong mix of strong employee bonding and retention. And then therefore the byproduct to that is, I would say, extremely diverse set of team. And it's not diverse, like in our case, we are 60-70% women in the entire team, but equally more so in leadership as well, where places you may not typically have women, you will end up having women, but you will end up seeing that. So I think that's where it is. Retention is significantly high. Third is also at some level with women being founders, and it also brings in a sense of easier inspiration for the junior team members to join. A lot of people who may come with very limited aspiration actually have come over here and had increase in their aspiration and thought process, and just so and then it becomes a more cascading effect. So we are almost a 5-year plus old organization. We started with 4 or 5 women around this, but as women grew in leadership around the space, we clearly saw that we could retain and get in more women. It was much easier for us to ensure that we do that. So that's where I would say culturally it enables us significant retention it ensures that there is equal amount of EQ in the ecosystem with the IQ that we typically end up saying. And yes, I mean, I think it's a long-term view that, you know, then it eventually results in significant women increasing in workforce as well.
Absolutely. I think that's 100% correct. And we've seen it at our organization itself, where we've actually ended up inspiring women in a way where they've gone ahead and started their own little businesses. So I think 100% on point. And I think to follow up on that, Ayushi, just when you mentioned passion and when you mentioned problem solving, does it also equip us or equip women leaders, so to say, in a way that they can take risks better and they can experiment better because they somehow inherently understand that there is this problem that needs solving, and hence are risk takers or experimenters? Or do you think that's agnostic, that's gender agnostic?
I think risk in my mind is actually fairly gender agnostic, and it is not linked to more women or men. I think risk-taking ability is a context in your mind. We call leaving our jobs coming from grade B school saying that it is risk-taking. You meet a blue-collared worker who doesn't know whether you will earn tomorrow's salary or not. That's risk-taking. And we worry that, you know, I mean, it's just a way of thinking. You know, there's technically no risk. If I really look at even anyone trying to run startup where you come from a strong educational background, you have good jobs, you know, end of the day, you will spend a couple of years trying to do startups and you call that risk taking. But if you do your math and the financial modeling, the NPV doesn't change, right? Your near-term cash flow changes. That's how I call that. So that's inherently not risk taking. It's just a context. We believe that someone else is earning today this much and therefore you may not be earning, and that's risk taking. But then you're taking that risk and you will probably have higher wealth in longer term. Or worst case, you can go back to job in a couple of years if it doesn't work, and you will still end up earning a bit more, but you will never, you know, resent or think that you didn't give it a shot. So it's genuinely a context, and it's fairly, I would say, gender agnostic in my mind when it comes to risk taking, I would say. And the only other nuance I would add is, I think feminine leadership, as I keep saying, difference between women leaders versus feminine leaders. That trait which enables women is that we are faster decision makers. Like if we take a stand, it's easier to take a stand. I don't need to overthink on these are the pros, these are the cons, you know, it is fair and you take a decision and you move on, versus it takes more time to decide in a different. So that's the nuance I would add, but it's not linked to risk-taking ability, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the question was more around experimentation with what we're doing in terms of the business that we run, in terms of, okay, can we try this or can we try something new out here? And
everyone would do it, and everyone wants to experiment fast, fail fast.
Correct. Absolutely.
You know, a little bit of, you were mentioning that risk taking is gender agnostic. I think one thing that's definitely changing now is the number of women getting in the tech field, right? Both of you are breaking the norm there. Ayushi, you're trying to build India's largest tech platform for fashion, while Priyanka, you're using technology for your mattress, right? You've IP'd it. What has been the biggest roadblock here, and what do you think definitely needs to change as we in the D2C space, right? Because D2C is all about technology in the end also. How's that experience been, and what are some learnings that you'd like to share with founders, aspiring founders, or just people in general?
Reemsha, I think I would look at it just a little bit differently. So I think if, you ask the roadblock, right? To be honest, if I look at today's time, I think it's the best time for entrepreneurs. All people who want to be entrepreneurs, I think it's the best time to be in and to be doing this, right? And the reason I say this is, I think given the number of brands or the startups that you've seen in the ecosystem in the last 3 to 4 years, the whole support ecosystem has come up, right? I think 4 years back, it used to be maybe challenging. For example, today, if if you want to start a D2C brand, it's so easy to get online, right? If you obviously you should understand the gap you're bridging, you should have a right product, right? But for example, it's easier for us to connect with consumers. There are tools, there's technology out there, CRM tools, which integrate all the consumer touch points, right? Or for example, for you to have order management, regional warehousing solutions. So I think it's a fabulous time for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur to really go and, just take the plunge. I think that having said that, I think what needs to change or what needs to keep on evolving, I think is two things, right? First, I think, our intent always is, so I think the ecosystem, the consumers will keep on evolving. We've seen this transition even in the last 2 years with COVID, right? Consumers have become, as I said, very, they have a lot of choices. They've become very, very product savvy, right? They want to know everything. For example, the example I always say, the way a consumer wants to know what's inside their shampoo, right? Why it's going to help them reduce hair fall. Exactly the same way they want to know what's inside my mattress or what is this grid material made up of, right? So I think it's important to make sure that brands should evolve as the consumers are evolving, right? So I think that's very, very important for all of us to keep on making sure that we're listening to our consumers all the time. I think the second thing which is important, and I think which is how do you create, so see, there is always, one can get carried away with building growth. So obviously growth is important, right? But you need to make sure that as you're growing, you're also building a long-term sustainable brand, right? We're all trying to build brands, right? How not carried away with, it's very easy to burn money and get consumers, right? But how do you strike a balance to make sure that you are building the right foundation and building the right brand and not get carried away with just burning money? So I think that is very, very important for anybody who is looking at building a brand or who wants to get into it, is that think from a business model, think from a sustainability, a long-term point of view. So what is the purpose you're obviously trying to, what is the purpose of the brand and how do you bring it to life from a long-term scenario is very, very important.
Ayushi, any thoughts on how the tech field is changing completely and how you're leading that?
So I think specifically Priyanka did cover, I think, broader roadblocks and when it is, and I totally, by the way, echo, I was vehemently nodding when she was saying all of this. But I think if I look at specifically a little bit more roadblocks, a little bit from the tech front, and this is, I think number one is a little bit of a, it's not a roadblock, but it is the context setting. Typically, historically, people assume that D2C brands don't need significant tech. End of the day, we have to understand that tech is a crucial enabler in all aspects of running businesses, and that enables us to scale in some shape and form. Second thing, which is a little bit more counterintuitive, but happens to a lot of founders, and sometimes I've seen at times more to women founders or where people don't, we all get easily afraid of what tech is. Tech is not complex. It's understanding, like, thankfully, I'm lucky that I'm an engineer, so I don't get swayed by this. But at the end of the day, it is good logical algorithm, which can enable you to scale. And if you don't get perturbed by what that tech could be, it's very easy to build. And you can think through that process a lot more structurally and seamlessly. So one, I would say, is that this challenge of saying that D2C brands are not easily built via tech and they are D2C and only e-commerce. And second, to believe that it's very easy to create tech are two important thought processes that we need to really keep that in mind. And third, which is actually a genuine roadblock, is overall hiring for tech is so hard that I don't want to get there. But, and also it's going to be a little bit of journey for a lot of, strong people in tech to believe that D2C are going to lead the tech space over and above the Ubers or the pure tech companies of the world. End of the day, there's a very big open space when it comes to tech where, the operational aspect of running a brand and tech come together. It's not the e-commerce front-end tech, but between the back-end tech and manufacturing, and that there's such a big opportunity there, and that itself will change the profitability and the P&Ls of the world. So, yeah.
No, absolutely fair. It's even I sometimes get scared of technology, but when you just sit to understand it, it's so basic, right? And it's not a male-centric thing or a female-centric thing, right? So just a plug in here, folks, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box to ask them or eventually raise your hands and we'll plug you in. Just moving on a little bit, and this is sort of my favorite question only because you get such different answers to this, is, how do you really think about diversity in a company? And how do you really integrate it right from the get-go, right? And that's not to say that you need only women, right? But just the concept and the theory of diversity, how important is that? And do you think, again, women leaders look at it differently from male leaders, or again, is that just a fad that's being thrown around? Either of you can start.
Why don't you go ahead, Priyanka?
Sure. So I think, Reemsha, for me, the way I would look at that. So firstly, I don't think a male or a female leader would look at it differently, right? I think diversity to me is about having different perspectives, right? There have to be different point of views in any company, or it's not just D2C, it's not just startups, okay? I think every company needs different perspectives because your consumers are different, right? Different consumers feel differently, right? Different. So it's important. So I think that's why diversity is important, so that there can always be different perspectives, which can lead to certain insights, which obviously help build brands or businesses, right? And the way, so if you need different perspectives, that means you need diversity from different contexts, right? For example, one could look at diversity from a male female point of view, right? Obviously, we've talked that a lot, what women bring on the table and what men can also bring on the table, obviously, right? Second, it could also be different backgrounds, different demographics, right? Different educational backgrounds. For example, Ayushi was talking about being from, being an engineer, you look at things in a certain way versus, let's say, being, from the creative field, or, being. So I think given an organization is not just one function, an organization is a cumulative of different functions, different. So I think that's where diversity is very, very important. Right. And I think, as you said, how do you build diversity from the start of your businesses, or what do you do? I don't think it's like, you can make a policy, okay, let's go, let's have equal women, or let's have people from different backgrounds. I think the way to look at it, and for example, I'll give you, for example, if, today we go out and we say we have an X role that we want to look for, the bad thing is when you get resumes, let's say from your, headhunters, they will always be skewed towards, let's say, men, because that's the reality, right? But you can make an effort and give equal opportunity, right? So to me, it's about give equal opportunity and then decide what fits where, right? I think that's how proactively, or, more consciously you can do from the start, which is create equal opportunities and don't fall into certain biases. Right, that we all end up getting into, be it education background or gender biases. So I think that's how we at the Sleep Company try to do from the beginning, and I think that's how I would look at diversity.
So I think, first of all, I kind of agree with Priyanka, but I also have a strong perspective on diversity, but it is more personal. I don't think it is linked to men versus women. I actually feel that, the idea of diversity in an organization is basically led by founder. And therefore, how the founder it doesn't matter, is how you will at least build the first, I would say the first 30, 40, 50, team members in your organization, and then subsequently they carry the culture. So from a diversity set of point of view, what I would typically end up thinking is that the way Priyanka puts it in terms of adding perspective, I would say that, for me as a founder, there are two themes which are very important, which make getting different and engaging with different kind of people. Number one is, by design, I'm a much more accepting individual for anyone for who they are and how they are. I don't start with judging anyone. I start with happily accepting who they are. And then second is, which is again very personal but important both career-wise, is I would love to learn more. And keeping these two thoughts in mind, it basically makes it much easy for you to start thinking about building an organization which is diverse in any shape and form. It doesn't matter whether it is gender, whether it is the educational backgrounds, whether it is even the fact that this person has had a deep, strong employment history versus this person was out of job before you got this person on board. It's significantly fairly, different. And we, as you run an organization, we have like design to IT to IMs to, very different background, different age groups. There is probably a 20-year-old, and there's so much to learn from all of them. So if you keep that in mind, I don't think in the first couple of years, as Priyanka also mentioned, you need to set a set of rules or policies. It's more organic in nature on how you try to build it, but it is founder-led. And I think that's really important for us to recognize. So what works well to think about doing this is to define a set of values that matter to you as an organization, and then try to run in terms of hiring for those values. And that's how I would say you think about including it, rather than making structural policies and say that this much person when, this much person this, around this. So for us, the value is learning, ensuring acceptance, genuinely caring about people, the attitude, the drive, and then other aspects of business. And those are the values we look for. And if we have a set of team members who are on common grounds, having similar values, irrespective of how different they behave, etc., they end up connecting very well. And then they are the ones who will hold the organization further and then disseminate those values naturally to you. So, I mean, we are about 55, 60 odd individuals. Till now, we've not needed to think formally about, thinking about the number of women and all, and I will send it in our MISs, etc. But that's a different thing. It's very natural that we don't need to. But I also feel at some point in time, as you start growing, you do need to put in a set of systems and processes in place to start thinking about making people understand what you stand for, so that the junior most layer also throws out those values aspects around it. And because eventually that's how people come in and join. Like feedback about FableStreet will be taken by the junior most person as well when they want to come and join us, right? So that throws out. So it's important that you integrate that learning and people understand why you do what you do. So that translation is important. Doesn't need to come in as a paper written set of rules and policies, but that really matters. And that's how you build a set of fairly, as Priyanka mentions, diverse perspectives, a set of people who come together and build something really huge and beautiful.
No, I think absolutely. It's all about perspective and making sure you take everyone on the journey, and you're not going away from the point of inclusion. And I think I really liked your point on how you're using values to drive this, right? It's not that target that you have that I want 70% women, but I want people who resonate with this. And that naturally, I think, then trickles down, and then you end up having those kind of practices inbuilt in an organization, right? And given that is what is important, it's important how you nail down those right values, Maybe we'll just open it up for some questions. We've got some questions on the board. Aditi, if you'd like to take over.
Yeah, I think there's a question from an anonymous attendee, and they are asking both Priyanka and Ayushi how they started their businesses, especially with respect to funding and finding the right product market fit. So I think a little bit of it Ayushi has already touched upon and Priyanka has already touched upon, but in terms of problem solving and so on. But any further light to shed on this?
Thanks Aditi for sharing that. So I think so first I think is about product market fit, right? I think even before you get into the product, I think for both of us, I think Ayushi also mentioned, I think the gap, it's important to understand the gap, right? And most of the time the gap comes from your own journey, right? And for example, specifically for me, this happened when I became a mother, right? And I think if you ask when I became a mother, I was really struggling for sleep, right? And I think if you ask any mothers, the one thing that they would say is become suddenly the most important thing, or the thing that you're most deprived of, is sleep, and suddenly, so I think that was the trigger point where, I suddenly, we realized that there is a huge gap in the industry, and specifically the Indian industry, comfort space or the mattress space, that, a product where most of us spend 1/3 of our life had not seen any innovations. The product quality is far worse off than any developed nation, right? So yes, the understanding of the gap got triggered by a personal experience, right? And then I think once you understand the gap, obviously so then we did research and we figured out a lot of brands in this category were entering, and they were trying to solve the gap of eliminating the middleman, right? You eliminate, and that's what a lot of D2C brands do. You eliminate the middleman, get from offline to online, right? But I think given, the background, and I think, I was always working in consumer brands and in marketing, I think, to me, it was very, very important. You do that, but how do you differentiate yourself in the clutter, and how do you really make an impact or help that consumer's life and make them really sleep better, right? And that's where the product comes into the picture. And I think that's where, once we got, we did a lot of R&D. We actually did R&D for almost 1.5 years, before we kind of invented, one of the biggest disruptions, which is our own patented smart grid technology in this segment. I think after that, once you get the product comes, how do you make sure that this is what your consumers love, and this is making an impact that you wanted to make an impact, right? So good thing is today's digital ecosystem, you go launch online, you can launch on marketplaces, you can launch on your website. But I think then the thing which is very, very important as you do your launches, and I think the first set of consumers you have, and the journey continues, right? I think it's a never, you're always learning. I think it's very, very important to listen to your consumers. The feedback that they're sharing, the reviews that they're sharing becomes very, very important to really figure it out if the product really fits with the consumers and is really helping consumers improve a certain part of their life, right? Because I genuinely believe that if you are solving a consumer problem and improving your consumer's life is the only way to build a brand, right? Obviously supporting with all other things. So I think that's very, very important. And today, to be honest, at the sleep company, we have launched a pipeline of products just listening to our consumers. Our consumers first, they love the mattress, and then they want a lot of other products in the technology. So most of our product R&D innovation pipeline is literally basis consumers feedback, and we use that tool. So for example, what we always do, if we have 2 ideas and we want to figure out what runs better with the consumers, we just go and launch a Facebook or an Instagram survey. We let our consumers vote, right? And I think that's what I think is the best way to test product market fit, right? That's how for me the journey for the sleep company started.
That's brilliant. Ayushi, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I have a little bit of more cliched answers to this, but I think they've kind of worked on thinking through the journey, and those are basic fundamental principles. I think number 1 is which the product market fit is finally like really crucial. There is no doubt about it. And in product market fit, again, as Priyanka mentioned, be clear about what need you are solving. And it's something that you're solving for consumers, not out of your passion. That should also be very clear. The need cannot be your need, but really universal in nature. And here, I think the answer is finally whether the customer buys you or not. There is no other answer to it. Here, I think I also slightly disagree with Priyanka saying surveys help. And we do tons of Instagrams and Facebook surveys and this sells and all. Finally, like in this sells and that doesn't resonate well. So for me, I think to finally believe that the need is something that it is, it's that when the customer is ready to put your money behind it and say that, yes, I want it, is when you know that you've cracked the need, right? But that's the core of product market fit. And that's the journey you will need to go through, understand the customers, build the product, reiterate the product. Finally, they need to be able to buy that from you. If they're buying, you have the product market fit, right? But that's step 1 and core to thinking about the PMF, right? The second aspect is being very clear about fundamental business blocks in place. This is where a lot of startup founders at times will get carried away. But in that getting carried away, I would say they've also built really large businesses versus where at least We have built risk-free businesses which will genuinely succeed or will genuinely become profitable and can be run on their own. If you know what it matters to your sector. In our case, it has to be a profitable, low working capital business, which has to be a brand oriented business. And as long as you know those building blocks right, and then build your organization while you're doing it, that's crucial as you think about starting a business and running a business. Third, again, I think in terms of the funding specifically, as the question did ask for, I don't think funding is hard, and I genuinely feel that it is gender agnostic. I may come from a sense of privilege if I say so, and I don't support that women get funded less on this. And I'm caveating that this is really my personal view, but I have genuinely gone through the journey of 2 fundraisers and eventually a third one, etc., where I have seen that investors have eventually looked at the quality of the founder, the pedigree, the background, etc., the clarity of thought in terms of the idea, and then once the business is in the process of running, then the actual quality of execution and the team that has stood by. And it's not been crazy hard to raise funds. It's been as hard that it is for any entrepreneur. And I mean, for me, as I look at it, and case in point, we can make a story out of it. I am a woman founder, hard. I'm a single founder, hard. But it's not as hard if you're building the right business. Investors do find the right business to invest in, and they would want to go behind it. People are then in it to make money, and we have to believe, therefore, if an investor is also questioning that, you know, they are not ready to fund you, so you may at least be, it's important to you to introspect why, rather than assume that I am not getting funded because I'm a woman founder. And that's how I would leave it. But funding is not hard. In current context, even easier for early stage businesses and Series A, and it would come in.
No, great. Those were some great perspectives to get. Ayushi, just there are a couple of questions specifically for you, and I'll try to club them all together. Sure. It's a lot around tech, right? Right from how do you decide what tech to use, given it's a fashion brand, right? So what does fitment and fitment algorithm mean, and how do you decide what technology to use? Second is around on the back end, right? With resources being so scarce in the fashion space, how are you optimizing on this, right? Especially given women's fashion is such a crowded space again, right? Those were the two main questions. And one more that's sort of coming is, do you take tech first or do you take the product gap first, right? Which one comes first? Any thoughts on that? So lots packed around that for you, actually.
So I answer the last first. Product need gap first. End of the day, you are selling something to the consumer, and it's the product. The customer will only come back for it. We can do great jing bang on tech, marketing, this, that, but finally, if the product, and in our case, it's apparel, if it doesn't look good on you, I can guarantee you that the customer is not coming back. The customer is not even coming back if I'm ready to give almost a free product to the consumer next time. And that's also how women as consumers are. You either love the brand or you hate it. There is no middle ground easily you are tolerant of it, right? So important to understand. So any day the focus and the energy first goes into product. Doesn't mean that we don't think about tech and discount tech. Important to equally recognize that where will tech fundamentally impact your business? And that's how you also therefore prioritize thinking about tech. So for us, tech is at 3 different levels and where we leverage tech around it. First one is the front-end tech, where you sell to the consumers via your online e-commerce platform. And then you have multiple aspects of tech around the customer journeys and around it, right? There it is, that's a problem that's solved for, and solved for in a much better manner than what we can solve for it. There are platforms that exist, you can leverage them. We don't therefore want to go there and say, we will start building from scratch. So, it's very easy to set up a website overnight and start running your business on it and get integrated around this. So that's a space we are happy to buy and not build on our own around this. So that's the front end side of it. Second 2 aspects when we think about tech for us is that 2 critical aspects of our business that are core to us is, from a brand and a product point of view, the core for us is fits. and sizing for Indian women and their bodies. Therefore, getting deeper into the data and what that sizing means, and ensuring that we keep collecting that data and using that to improvise our sizing and then keep our customers happier for future. It's a core business rule and a metric. It's a loyalty driver for the consumer. It's a profitability and a retention driver for me to long term. So that's why we chose to invest in sizing as a tech around it. And second bit of tech for us is the supply chain backend. Within supply chain as well, there are multiple layers to it. There are places where tech is available and there are places where tech is not available. The core when it comes to apparel is ensuring that we are working on the lowest amount of working capital or inventory. If you have inventory, you are doomed. It's a supply side game. There was no tech over here. There is a very easy answer. We decided to build it from scratch. Building tech again, so therefore that's how you prioritize. And that's where we went into it. Now, how to think about building it and where it is that eventually we need to have answer V1 first. And we and how you operationalize it. So we did set up our own manufacturing unit, set up a layer of tech around it, tested, etc. around it, and then we decided to scale it up. So you basically have to go through a usual journey of piloting, testing, figuring it out, and then running and testing it at scale. And it's a usual run of the mill process. It's not a difficult process. I think where you need to be clear is where you put in your resources and where you prioritize. And that has to be fundamentally clear that that's a business driver for you, core. Otherwise, there's no point in spending that time because there's just so much to do.
Reemsha, go ahead.
Great, I'll go ahead. No, completely makes sense. I think 3 different things: use what is already there, don't reinvent the wheel, figure out what's your core, how do you build technology around that. I think great insights for people to, adopt. A little bit, again, I think Priyanka, maybe you can lead this one, right? It's all about innovation here. How do you really, and I know the sleep company was also bootstrapped at one point of time, right? How do you really build on innovation when you're at that level, right? Resources are crunched, but you're trying to differentiate and you're trying to build something that's really innovative, right? Not been done in the industry at all, and building a business, right? And how do you balance all of that? What was your take on it, especially in such a new sector also?
Yeah, thanks, Reemsha. So the way I look at innovation, right, is how do you make anything better, right? How do you make anything better? To me, is innovation, right? So I don't think to drive innovation, right? For example, we drove the innovation in the product, right, or how we reach the consumers or how we delight the consumers. I don't think it's not that you need a huge team to drive innovation, right? I think what you need, one is I think we said this across the session. Ayushi also repeated it. I think it's really about understanding the gap first, right? What is really the gap that you're trying to fulfill? And is that gap a big enough gap? Right? You don't want to be operating in a niche. If you want to build obviously a big business, right? Or a icon. So to me, it's first really understanding the gap, how you're going to bridge that gap with the product or with whatever solutions and services you're doing, right? So when we started, we literally had a team of only 3 people, right? And I think what you need is really, as you got the gap, the passion has to be there, right? You have to be really, really persistent. I think one thing which is very important for all the founders, not women, not male, but anybody who wants to do, I think persistence and believing in what you're trying to solve is very, very important. Right? You would have a lot of lows as you're trying to kind of solve the problem, right? Till the time you've not even launched, you don't even know if your consumers are going to buy it, right? So you have to believe in that passion so hard and believe in that vision so hard that you keep on doing and making sure that you get the right product or right product market fit, right? And for example, I'll give you an example. When we launched, it was team of just 4 of us. We launched, and in the first literally 2 months, basis consumer feedbacks, right? I think we had to make literally 20 to 30 iterations in our products, right? And to me, and to do that, as I said, one is obviously, you have to sell the product. Once you sell the product, you get the feedback, and you have to really stay close to your consumers, right? So to me, you can start small. We all start small, right? You have to see, to build a long term or to build a sustainable business model, you have to see what works for your brand, right? What are the, what is the financial structure you have on your brand? What kind of, depending on category, what gross margins you have, right? What kind of spends or CAC you can have on your brand, right? What kind of, to make sure that you have a sustainable model. And I think gradually is when you will build the team, you will build the business, and you will build the brand. And you need to keep on innovating, not just on the product, but you need to keep on innovating, obviously, how you reach your consumers and how you build the brand and how you kind of get more and more consumers acquired, right? And then how do you build your community to retain those consumers and to drive loyalty, right? And then obviously, so I think innovation to me is anything that is making consumers' life easier or better, right, across the funnel, right? And I don't think to drive innovation you need big teams. It's not that you need a tech team of 10 people sitting in your office to drive an innovation. I think you need an understanding of your consumer, the gap, and the passion to do it, right? I think is how I would look at driving innovation.
Great. And any thoughts on how do you do resource management and how thrifty are women at doing that?
I'm very thrifty.
I think it's in the DNA, Reemsha. It's in the DNA. I think that's where, I think that's also one very important element I would add, which is, don't get carried away with the frenzy and with the, going crazy. But I think how do you be responsible? How do you create a sustainable brand and a work environment is very, very important. And I think, I think that's in the DNA of a lot of women.
Yeah. I just want to add a small element of innovation, and happy to take the next question. But I think we have a very high bar on definition of innovation, which also scares us away. Everyone wants to call what we are calling innovation, etc. Right? So for us, when I started to try to solve about sizing around this, I also started with the place that, oh my God, the entire country has been solving this problem for like donkey's amount of years. What can we do differently to make it happen? And I literally spent 1 or 2 months trying to do crazy amount of data analytics on size charts that existed completely like all over the world. Literally, I did all of that, and I realized that, my outcome is garbage in, garbage out. And then I had to go back to my McKinsey learning of first principles. I said, let's see, maybe give it one more shot. And it was about like, let's measure the woman, let's measure the garment that fits her right. Let's measure the woman, let's measure the garment that fits her right. Let's start finding the typical outcomes that we start doing. And to an interesting surprise, we could come up with a V1 of potential answer to sizing by doing so with about 40-50 women. To such interesting surprise that, our first test fit of the first garment turned out to be right. And I could not believe it, because the innovation and the meaning of innovation is so exaggerated that I was vehemently sure that I was doing something wrong. So, sometimes it's about bringing in some logical thinking to your process.
Yeah,
it could be a more simple answer. You have to trust that maybe someone else hasn't tried it. So that's how I would think about innovation. And second, potentially still, is that there has to be a timeline for you to try it. And I slightly therefore disagree with Priyanka over here, that one is about passionate aspect to drive innovation and be persistent about it. But at some point in time, when you know that this is not happening and there has to be a timeline relevance to it, then you also have to pause. Otherwise, it will be a never-ending game of passion and believing around it. So, I have a more realistic view to it. Again, it's very personal in nature.
No, absolutely. I think even we internally, when we talk about innovation, it's a lot about how research-led is it, right? It's not about, are you always innovating to have like a rocket in the sky, right? Even small
I'm not building the next Tesla for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Aditi, over to you.
I think there's time for one last question, and I think this is again directed to Ayushi from somebody anonymous. What are the challenges of being a sole founder, and how have you tackled them? And maybe I think Priyanka's take on it might be interesting as well, to understand the other side of it.
So let me start with saying it's fairly hard. I would be lying if I say that, it's not hard being a single founder. But at the same time, if I were to do it all over again, I will do it. So that's how I would think about it around this. And I think what matters is that you will need to understand who are you as an individual, and therefore what matters to you. And that's going to be a journey. In my case, I was fairly aware early on that it's not going to be easy to find someone who has similar passion to the cause. So why not plunge into it? And I took that jump not thinking that I need a co-founder. I clearly took the jump into it, that what's in it to lose, as I said about risk. So that's how I thought about it. And then jumped into building it, not thinking whether I need a founder or a co-founder with me. Over the course of journey and in general, you realize that you do need a thought partner in some shape and form with you. It enables decision making easier. It enables validation about what you're doing easier. The first few years of journey, you are making thousands of decisions on a daily basis. And anyone who's not used to it, and I come from consulting as a world where, I can give pros and cons, but I can never make the decision. So you have to be aware that you have to take that jump around it. So, the way for me to tackle about it was two ways. One, I did create an ecosystem of a set of founders around me who I could reach out to and trust. I do have a similar ecosystem in my family with all my husband, my sister, and brother-in-law being ex-consultants and also founders in the in the ecosystem. So we do reach out to each other, problem solve jointly. So I've created an informal set of founders or thought leaders for me, which would have enabled, and that really helped me in my early years of journey. The second thing I did go through was, build in a team which I trust and who also has my back. And it's been a mutual understanding and learning of trying to build that team. So in my head, my team is like the core team and co-founders. I let them see my vulnerabilities. I let them see who I am and what I am. They also come back and respect me as an individual. So it enables a space where I am not working in a state of stress, because eventually it's not difficult to do all aspects of work, but it's difficult mentally to be a single founder when it comes to the decision making and the stresses that you go through. So you need an ecosystem over there. The second area where it's a bit hard is still on divisions of work, right? I am literally doing almost everything, or I had to do everything, where any day a co-founder would help. I think it's really hard being a single founder. It can be done, but you need to be clear on what you need to do. COVID has been the hardest time ever, where you are battling to run a business, you are battling to manage your investors, you're also at the helm where your team is not insecure about you, and you're also caring and concerned for your team and your family to be safe. But if any of us have come out of COVID, I think it just everything else seems like a breeze. So yeah.
Priyanka, what's your take on this, having a co-founder and a partner on this journey, And what balance, I think, also just staying true a little bit to the topic, a male-female co-founder, how's that been?
Yeah, so Reemsha, the way I look at it, it's not to me a one founder versus a two founder conversation, right? I think it's about firstly two things. One is, what is it that the founders are bringing on the table, right? If it's this, is it a different complementary? So what is needed to drive a business, and are the co-founders bringing a complementary skill set on the table to build that business, right? Which is, I think, for both Harshil and me, right? We both come from completely opposite backgrounds. We've handled completely different businesses. So I've always been on the consumer side, and Harshil has always been on the operations manufacturing side. So I think that's what really, I would say one big advantage. If you have co-founders who bring complementary set, it's not just for the sake of having a co-founder that you need to have a co-founder. Now, having said that, even if let's say you are two, co-founders or three co-founders, I think what is important is all the elements that Ayushi said. Just because you have more than one founder, doesn't negate the need of, I would say, having an ecosystem of obviously a great team, right? Because 2 or 3 people can never build a brand, right? You need a team to build a business, right? So I think that is very, very important. Second thing, which is, which I think is true for both Harshil and, me as well, we lead our complete different parts of the business. Obviously, on more strategic discussions, we will always, kind of debate with each other, and the different perspective also helps, right? But you also need to have the ecosystem of, we always go back to other founders, our friends, and, our mentors, and really, because as Ayushi said, the journey of being founders, is difficult, is very, very difficult. You make hundreds of decisions, for the business, which you've never done. When you're working, when you're doing a job, you don't do that, right? And suddenly the ecosystem changes, and you think everything that you learned is not what is really coming to the rescue, kind of a thing. So I think you still need to develop that ecosystem of a strong team of strong mentors or friends who are helping you in the journey. But I think, as I think, it's the best journey, right? I think the only thing that I always tell, if somebody asks me, the one regret, why I didn't do it earlier, why I didn't venture into it earlier, right? I think, yeah.
No, great. I think we'll take this one last sort of a rapid fire question and then wrap it up. We're completely out of time for both of you. If not what you had started, what would you have done? So Ayushi, if it wasn't FableStreet or women's wear, what else would you have done? And same for you, Priyanka. And what's next for both of you, right? What are you really, really looking forward to?
So I'll quickly go and make it quick and rapid. I think I'm fairly, so for even for FableStreet, I think the core longer term vision is about making women feel beautiful and confident about themselves. So if not FableStreet, I would have ventured into a space around it, but fairly a commercial space as well. What's next in FableStreet? We are doing tons of new brands and new innovations around it. We are launching 2 more brands. One has just been launched, another is in process. So there's a lot of excitement coming in, but we do want FableStreet to be the largest house of brands in apparel space in India and eventually globally. So there's a long journey to go, and very excited about that journey.
I think for me, Reemsha, I wouldn't trade it for anything else. I think for me, I love consumer brands, right? And for us, the vision is really, become the world's best comfort tech brand, really change the way people sleep and sit, and we at the sleep company doing lot of exciting stuff. I think as we talk, we're going live into international markets, right? So you would see sleep company in Japan and in UAE, literally starting this week. That's very exciting. We're really learning and building, learning on how we build our omni channel. So I think that's very, very exciting. That's and third is, I think, continue to innovate on products, on that can really, make our consumers sleep and sit better.
Sounds great. I think there were some brilliant insights into both of your businesses and into your lives also in some way. And I'm sure everybody who's joined in has had a lot to sort of take back. Just to very quickly wrap it up and very quickly summarize, so to say. We've heard some great thoughts on how women leaders as such have that perspective, have that advantage of understanding needs and consumer behavior better to be able to solve for a problem, and passion and empathy is allowing them to do this better. So thanks a lot, Priyanka and Ayushi, for sharing, and taking time out and sharing with everybody.
Thank you so much for having us, guys. Very exciting.
Yes, thank you, Reemsha. Thank you, Aditi. It was absolutely a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.